Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee meeting. We do have 5 items today, so let's get right into it. And number 1 is we're going to receive a briefing about the direction and the near-term plan of the ITPCC. And so those of you who are here for this particular item, please join us at the table there. And Dr. Torregas, you've prepared packet for us, so I'd like to have you walk us through the briefing, and but first we'll just go down the list, down the row here for everybody to introduce yourselves for the record, and then we'll discuss the highlights and move right ahead. So let me begin with Ms. Roper. If you can press the button, introduce yourself for the record, and then we'll go down the list.
Good afternoon. Gail Roper, CIO for the DTS organization.
Andrew Klein, Chief Administrative Officer for Montgomery County Government.
Patrick Fian, I am the IT Privacy and Security Officer at Montgomery College.
Dr. Christopher Carter, I'm the CIO for WSSC Water.
Welcome. Oh, there you go.
Ian Williams, HOC, Housing Opportunities Commission. I'm the CTO there.
Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. So, Dr. Torregas, if you can kind of get started. First, I will say that, you know, this particular group has had a long history here in our county. And I know that for myself, I can speak for myself and the members of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, we have always seen this particular model of collaboration as a really important one to move forward with efficiencies, but also with innovation. And I think it's almost as an opportunity of a kind of a laboratory that's very rare for all the agencies to be able to come together and identify work plans and different ways of sharing best practices, but also trying to identify those opportunities where we can maximize and leverage all the resources. And I know that, you know, a lot of the members have sort of rotated throughout the years, but everybody has been so committed and so invested. And I know, you know, this committee made sure that resources were allocated so that the group could actually function and really, truly be productive. And so, of course, with the transition of a new administration, I assume that we understood that there would be a little bit of time for everybody to get adjusted, but I'm very eager to hear and to see where we can take this and kind of take it to a next level, because I think there's just so much really wonderful work that that we can gauge. And I know, Mr. Klein, as you talked about realignments and different efficiencies, et cetera, again, this is a group that has been working for so long that could be of a great resource. So just want to, in advance, just thank everybody for all the work that has taken place. And Dr. Torregas, you've led this for quite a while as well as the staff person. So let me turn it over to you and walk us through the particular briefing.
I'm going to be very brief, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Klein for his statement. I just wanted to say 2 things. One is, you're absolutely right. ITPCC is a very unique organization. I've worked with many, many counties across the United States, and Montgomery County is absolutely blessed to have ITPCC as a strategy to help agencies work across their boundaries, their stovepipes. So the GO Committee has been very, very kind and very, very supportive to continue this ITPC for some 25 years now. The second thing I'll say is that ITPCC has a very unique structure of a policy group and then a technical group. The policy group is made up of the heads of the various agencies of Montgomery County, and the technical group is made up of the CIOs. What you have here on this table is the chair of the policy group, Mr. Klein, and you have the chair of the CIO subcommittee, Ms. Roper. They have counterparts across each and every agency. So the first work session that we are in now, number 1, we'll talk a little bit about ITPCC, the work plan for the coming year. And then on item number 2, you'll have a chance to hear directly from the CIOs. That's all I have to say. And Mr. Klein, you're up.
Okay, Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So as Dr. Torregas' memo says, the ITPCC has not been active over the past year. This is due to transitions of IT leadership in Montgomery County government and also in some of our partner agencies. My purpose today is to assure you that with Gail Roper in place as Montgomery County Government CIO, we're going to get moving in assessing the status of projects from the prior ITPCC work plan and developing a new work plan for FY 21-22. So I plan to convene the ITPCC Principals Committee in the next 2 months to discuss strategy and give guidance to the CIO Subcommittee, which will meet over the summer to draft the new work plan. The Principals Committee will reconvene in the fall to approve the draft work plan, which will be presented to the Council for input. I anticipate that the ITPCC will continue to focus on using technology to advance equity, securing our IT infrastructure, collaborating to make the most cost-effective use of taxpayer dollars, innovating to improve services to residents, enhancing and monetizing FiberNet, which is critical as cable fund revenues decline, and facilitating economic growth. Our work will be informed by the shared policy and service delivery goals of our agencies, and we will look to develop budget proposals cooperatively. We also look at how we can provide analytical and logistical support to the ITPCC. Montgomery County government is taking several steps that will make us an effective leader of the ITPCC. The most important of those steps was hiring Gail Roper as our CIO. We will soon bring on a Chief Digital Officer and Director of Project Management. We recently completed an enterprise-wide IT assessment and will be putting in place IT governance structure to give better direction to our IT resources and clarify roles and responsibilities. I want to thank Dr. Terregas for his advice and guidance, and turn it over to Gail to give you a brief update on the Department of Technology Services.
First, I'd have to say that I am completely honored to be here, to have an opportunity to collaborate with my colleagues across the county, to learn more about what they do, and also to continue to provide the core services that we offer. I'm excited simply because I see opportunities for innovation across the county, to bring some recognition to the county in regard to utilizing nascent technologies, some that I've had experience with in former places. I think there's lots of significant equity opportunity in our FiberNet network, and we're going to work to think more analytical about that and to find ways for it to even become more beneficial to communications and our communities. I would also say that the work plan should inform our budgets as we move forward and become a way for us to look at strategically at a year of work and multi-year strategies. Andrew, Chief Administrative Officer, mentioned the issue around my hiring of Chief Project Manager. I think part of that is very obvious to me, that we need to have a standard, structured way of managing large initiatives, particularly, but that we can collaborate and maybe adopt some standards in the way that we manage our projects so we inform better both internally and externally. Again, you know that I'm new to the organization, have a lot to learn, but I'm excited about working with this group and learning more about how we can benefit our community.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else is going to present?
I just wanted to give the committee a couple of ideas of how you can continue to support the ITPCC in areas of leadership, capacity to perform projects, stable funding over time, and administration imperatives. There are details that can be worked out, and I look forward to working with my friends at the executive branch and the whole ITPCC to flesh these out and to make sure that there's substantive progress over the next few months.
So, so I just had a couple of questions. So in terms of the budget that we had allocated, so where do we stand with that, and what is the plan of the county executive? I don't remember the figure exactly, but I know that we had. allocated a particular amount of money so that, you know, some projects could be worked on and things of that nature. So where are we with that?
The budget for the ITPCC is usually allocated to individual agencies that undertake projects. There is a non-departmental account, NDA, project for ITPCC that has an extremely small amount of money, $3,000. One of the explicit recommendations that I've made over time is that perhaps look at this NDA and consider putting some real resources that could help the ITPCC move forward with actual projects. It's hard when you have 6
I
different
thought we had
agencies.
done that in the past.
Not in the last-
Had we not, I thought we had allocated additional funding because I remember that sort of 3,000, but I also remember, and I don't have the information in front of me, that we had made a commitment so that there could be some
You've
resources.
certainly made commitments in specific projects. For example, I remind you, under the GEO initiative, you funded a project to add laptops to the school system across the board, and several other initiatives like that. But there have been specific initiatives in one agency. It's been very hard to allocate across agencies. The last time you did that was maybe 2014, 2015, when you funded a program to initiate a single registration system, single vendor registration system for the procurement system of all county agencies, and that's been working extremely well. That kind of collaborative funding hasn't been in existence for the last, let's say, 3-4 years.
Okay.
And I think perhaps one of the things that the executive branch is thinking about is how to reorganize the priorities and try to make funding focused on specific priorities. But again, the priorities have to come from the principals.
Right.
Have to come from policies. They can't be just a CIO priority. They
And
must
then
come from the
and
principals.
then the position of executive director, what's the status with that?
So we had a position that was funded for a program manager for ITPCC. That was lapsed last year and continues to be lapsed. So
That was
there
under
is
the
no
legislative
central-
branch, right?
It was.
Okay, so we need to address that as part of this conversation as well. And so at this point, then, are we targeting a fall 2020 timeline to understand? But then
Yes.
what happens with but then we're sort of missing out on a whole budget cycle.
Yeah,
to-
I mean, we will, as the next work plan is developed, you know, we're certainly going to have in mind, you know, how that relates to the budget, so that, you know, for the fiscal 22 cycle, we will certainly have those recommendations to make. But in the meantime, you know, one of our first steps is to take a look at where are we on the work plan that exists today that is somewhat outdated, but there are a lot of projects that are happening, some completed, some midstream, some I think have been abandoned. So we need to get a lay of the land on that.
Got it. Okay. All right, anything else, Dr. Torres? Okay. All right, so is that item 1 and 2, or are we now going to turn to 2?
Item 1. Item
One.
2 will be
Okay.
brief, but it's slightly different.
All right.
Should I just
Yes.
continue on item 2? Item 2 is an overview of each of the 6 agencies that make up ITPCC and their work program. And you have in your packet a very detailed and common in presentation format showing of all the individual agencies and what investments they're making in IT. I thought it might be useful to have introductions from each of the agencies represented here from the technology side. We have an MCPS representative. Please, I'd urge you to come and join us here.
We need to find a chair. Do we have one? There is.
One in the middle? And
Where?
there's an extra mic.
Yeah, but it's lacking a chair.
There's like a chair.
There you go.
And perhaps what I would, given the press of time and your busy schedule this afternoon, I would urge each of the CIOs to perhaps identify themselves and present 1 or 2 specific priorities or challenges that perhaps could be worked on through the ITPCC.
Perfect. All right. Start with you.
I'm Chuck McGee. I'm the Director for Infrastructure and Operations at Montgomery County Public Schools and one of the directors for Pete Chevanini, our Chief Technology Officer, representing MCPS today. As probably seen in the presentation that we've submitted, there's a number of initiatives all around the importance around cloud technology and the major applications that we use at MCPS, making the move to the cloud, specifically around the move of our ERP system, as well as our student information systems being two of the most important changes that will be coming in this coming school year. So obviously the need for capacity and the importance around data privacy and security of the internet connections and student data as it exists in other people's networks and data centers will be paramount to the success of these projects. So that's where the work is currently focused, and that's what will be the priority for FY21 for us.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrick Fian, Deputy CIO at Montgomery College. We also gave our points, but summarized, we are working on a new ERP, which is Workday, which consumes a ton of resources, both in IT and outside of IT. It's always a major force. We are trying to continue planning around student success, and a lot of that is how we revamp our workstations, our laptops, because they seem to get old fast, and so keeping a life cycle on that is always a challenge. And then we've had a year of lots of security initiatives. We added two-factor authentication. We have mandatory training of all employees now, and we worked with Keith Young over there on awareness activities, and I think we all get together, and that benefits us all to get together, all the agencies, and work in those activities. But we're busy, and the student is our chief client in how to enhance their experience at the college.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. As stated, Christopher Carter, CIO for WSSC Water, which is a commission chartered by the state and serving both Montgomery County and Prince George's County, with a commission comprised of 3 commissioners from each county. Glad to announce that we now have a full complement of commissioners. So that's good, helps give us that guidance. Some of the things that we're working on from an IT perspective is a major move to a consolidated system for what we call customer to meter, and that is supporting the future of the automated meter infrastructure, which will collect meter data much more quickly, and then how that gets used to enhance the customer experience. The customers are every water customer in the county, so it's essentially everybody. It's approximately 500,000 meters, which serves about 3 times that many residents. So that major upgrade now has presented a number of challenges for us. One of them is kind of the lack of a full, complete enterprise architecture in which to look at how new systems integrate with everything else that we still have, all the peripheral systems. So we're undertaking an enterprise architecture review effort as well. And then the flip side of that is preparing for the next generation of services like the automated meters, and what it takes to change the way meters are read, and how that makes better service to the customers, what they can see in their portal, what goes into their bill, and the eventual goal for that is to get to monthly billing instead of quarterly as we do now. And then another area that is strong in my background, as I came from the State Department and diplomatic security in the cybersecurity office, is to work on a very good comprehensive cybersecurity plan for WSSC Water, including for the SCADA systems, the systems that run all of the plants, and making sure that's properly protected, but also all customer information is protected. So those are some of our major initiatives.
Thank you, very important. Yes, Josie.
Good afternoon. Ian Williams again, CTO for HOC. Some of the big initiative right now sounding much like MCPS, is that our big move to the cloud. We're moving through the process of our email, data storage, document management system, and also, as we're doing that, integrating also, it becomes useful that it doesn't require it to be tied to a physical building, but we can work remotely. Another big key piece as we're doing this is expanding the free Wi-Fi out to all the residential units, the buildings, and so forth. And what we've found that's allowed us to do is to create more of the capacity for HOC staff and our clients to connect virtually. They can now use things like a Google Hangouts or what have you. So it's beginning to close that gap where we're not as reliant for someone to drive out there.
Yeah.
We can set up a meeting quickly using conferencing, video conferencing.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. So before I turn to Council President, just a very quick question. So just curious in terms of the nature, the collaborative nature and everything that one can share. Obviously, you know, when we're watching the news and in Seattle, they closed about 33 schools and they're moving into now, you know, just online instruction. Does MCPS, in collaboration with Montgomery College, are there opportunities to share best practices to kind of figure out, you know, what would that look like in some event that the county would have to do such a thing? Just wondering if there are some best practices from these jurisdictions who are having to do this that we're looking at, and how could we collaborate across agencies to be ready in the event that would have to be done. There been any conversations about that?
I can say from almost a micro level, I know that in fact there are a number of conversations happening right now. It is a very important topic in terms of what we do with our schools, how we continue education where possible, and actually exploring a number of technology considerations for how we do that, even beyond the curriculum, of course, and some of the other instructional content and programs that would need to exist under those circumstances. So right now, as a matter of fact, as soon as I leave here, I run to a meeting back at MCPS with where there's a committee formed that will continue conversations along those lines. Any work that we're doing with Montgomery College, I might not know about, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those conversations are happening.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those conversations are happening. I mean, yesterday I was in one meeting about updating certain network infrastructure, and the second meeting was pandemic planning. So, you know, that everyone is kind of going through that right now. How do we continue to deliver services? And fortunately, we've moved a lot of things to the cloud. Our email is now in the cloud. We backed up our documents to the cloud. We have a redundant data centers. We try to do a lot of those things. We have a significant online presence already that we use, and obviously, if campuses are closed, it would need to be, everyone would have to get together and figure out how to continue to do these classes, et cetera. And I think we're all thinking and working with the same set of data and of ways we can solve it.
It's probably worth noting, and maybe not obvious, but that the big challenge now is, while we have moved a number of our systems to the cloud, and certainly it's probably no surprise that we're a Google shop, so to speak, with the number of Chromebooks that we have and the dependency on some of the Google resources. Having email and having the Google presence is wonderful in terms of kind of removing some of the physical requirements for the education, but now it's a matter of how do we ensure that everyone, regardless of their location, can gain access to those resources.
Exactly.
So that's the immediate concern from a technology perspective, is making sure we can extend those resources to all students.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that it's very comforting to know that it is something that's already, you know, being discussed, and that we are just preparing. I think that we're learning quickly from, like I said, other jurisdictions that have had to then activate, that just doesn't happen overnight. So, you know, this kind of planning and just, you know, preparation, et cetera, it's always wonderful to have it in place. And if we don't ever have to activate it, wonderful. But if we had to, then we're ready.
It's also interesting to know that some of the technologies that we find probably most readily accessible, even things that we're most comfortable with, we've, maybe tapped the resources of what we have, and when we need more, we're finding that they're stuck in, other countries that are dealing with an inability to send us more. So that's where the creativity really has to come through.
That's exactly right, which is why I think that, these kinds of committees are really important, because you can really, truly learn from each other and collaborate.
It is. We all say, thank God we moved to the cloud. Well, our cloud providers are people too, and their facilities may be under attack at some point. So we're keeping fully aware of how redundant they are, so that our cloud services, in theory, are going to always be there. But we're aware they also could be
uncharted territory. So it's good to think of all those scenarios. Yes, Council President Katz.
Thank you very much, and thank you all very, very much for everything that you're doing. We appreciate it. And to the whole idea about COVID-19, of course, and we had an update just this week, and Montgomery County is truly very, very fortunate on all the people who are working on that. See, the expression, you hope for the best and plan for the worst, and that's what we're doing. At this point, we feel comfortable that we're certainly there. But to the point about redundancy, and that's regardless of whether COVID-19, and that hopefully will pass and everybody's going to be fine. But we really need to keep that in mind. I mean, just Nashville had this tornado that went through. Nobody expected it to happen, and all of a sudden we have a disaster. And so we have to have some sort of contingency in place that says, when these situations happen, in that case a horrible situation, that at least we have a background, we know what to do, and obviously every one of your agencies is doing that, and we all should applaud that and thank you. But I have to tell you, for HOC, I guess it's been a couple of years ago, maybe even a little longer than that, I think it was Comcast, gave out, through MCPS, gave out iPads and other computers to some of the families that lived in HOC buildings, and the Wi-Fi was in the main areas. And what a game changer it was. I mean, mothers with tears in their eyes came over and said, my child can finally get to the next step for their education. And that is something that we absolutely have to keep in mind. If we have a situation where people have to not leave their facilities, then the children and the adults too, for that matter, need to have that capability, so that they're being able to do the work that they need to do. So I think that's something that we all need to continue to work together to make certain that our families are protected, and I know that you all are working with us to do that. So thank you all for what you do.
Thank you. All right. Anything else, Dr. Torres?
I just need to remind you that last week when you met to review CIP programs, there was a program about data storage in the cloud and elsewhere, and you specifically asked the ITPCC to take it under advisement. So I just wanted to remind the ITPCC that's something that comes from the GEO committee in our CIP program. And then finally, the one area.
Dr. Tragus, are you saying they haven't solved that yet from last week? Is that what you're telling us?
But Gail is on it.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing is, for the last 3 years, I have been suggesting to the ITPCC through my packets to you and the GEO committee to consider undertaking an enterprise-wide strategic plan. Each of the 6 agencies do their own strategic plan, as they should. But if we are to gain efficiencies, if we are to actually find both improvements and cost savings, it will not happen without some kind of a plan, a strategic plan across the agencies. So this might be the year to consider that enterprise-wide strategic plan. It would take a lot of collaboration, a lot of walking in untested waters, but I think that's the first specific step that should be taken.
Is that something that you could do?
I'd love to do that. I think the resource questions that you raised come to mind, but we'll talk with Dr. Torregas and amongst ourselves, and I'm hoping that the agencies can kind of pool together, some resources from within our base. I know that's tough, but we do need some analytical and other logistical support for the ITPCC. I think if we did a strategic plan, just given the scale of this, we probably need some external
Right.
consulting support.
Of course.
So we have to see if we can find resources for that.
All right, Dr. Torregas, I guess you have a partnership here to pursue this important task. All right. Okay, so I think that's it. Well, thank you very much. I very much look forward to what's going to come back. I'll say that, a part of me was a little bit disappointed that not much had happened, but I understand that this was obviously a major transition. But I think it's really pivotal that we move forward, because we will be able to, I think, realize a lot of, important innovation and also maybe even efficiencies. But overall, I think this model is one that we need to pursue and we need to keep. So I really appreciate everybody being so committed to continuing the work. And please go ahead and join your other meeting over there. Want to make sure that you make it on time. Well, all right. Well, thank you so much. So our third item is the preliminary review of the cable strategic plan. I have here for us to come forward, people from Connect Montgomery, previously PEG, Governance Board. We have Ms. Keating, Ms. Hobson, and members of the Connect Montgomery Governance Board. I guess Ms. Roper is still here, Joe Webster, as well as Allison Dollar, I believe, are listed on the packet.
Allison sends regrets. She has another session that she could not leave.
All right, no problem. So, all right, Dr. Torregas, walk us through this particular briefing.
Just to set the foundation before I turn it over to the two co-chairs of the governance board.
Yes.
The council, in your wisdom, passed the cable plan as a council resolution, and on page 2 of my packet, you'll see that you're required under paragraph 8 the executive to submit to the Government Operations Committee a public education government PEG governance board strategic plan that will frame 2021 fiscal year budget allocations no later than January 15th. And indeed, that plan was submitted on January 17th. And an addendum was provided just over the weekend on February 29th. Those are the two documents that you requested by council resolution, and you're here to hear these two submissions. There is going to be another third part of the discussion, which has to do with revenues from the cable plan.
Right.
We heard allusions to our concerns, and there's some information to give you some guidance on that topic. So with that as an introduction, I'd like to ask the two co-chairs perhaps talk a little bit about the new name, the new vision, the new mission, and where they see it going.
All right, who's going to start? Ms. Hobson?
Good morning, or afternoon, actually. I'm Nanette Hobson. I'm a co-chair of the new Connect Montgomery Alliance. I'm also the CEO of Montgomery Community Media. We chose a new name for our organization to reflect our new dedication to collaboration, especially when it comes to our work and our missions. We are committed to turning our work into a collective that represents all of the different parts of us. The very entities are different audiences, but collaboratively to be focused on the issues that are most important to not only our audiences, but also to the county government. And so the Connect Montgomery moniker not only represents the platforms and a brand where everyone can find that collected information, but also our own dedication to a single platform that serves as many audiences as possible. So that is our new foray into the future. We're proud to say that we have come together to refocus our vision for what we look like in the future, and to do so in a new digital age where we can push that content out to the audiences as they need them.
Mm-hmm. Right, Ms. Keating?
Good afternoon, Donna Keating, Media Services Manager with DTS. Thank you, Dr. Torregas, for your guidance, and thank you for the opportunity. I just want to go over briefly some of the highlights of the plan. We really are looking to strengthen our collaboration, and that comes in many forms, whether we're talking about collaborating on programming, simulcasting. As an example, Tuesday's COVID-19 press event was carried on many of our channels. We, as you very well know, we collaborate when it comes to purchasing equipment. We collaborate on warranties. Connect Montgomery, our platform that Ms. Hobson spoke about, is a collaboration. And each day, Monday through Friday, we post content relevant to not only our overall organizations, but things that are important to county government. Part of what we are looking, which is included in the plan, is to have what we're calling an alliance manager. And that individual would help us move forward the things that we are seeking to do together. We're not looking for any additional funding. We would fund that person from the resources that are currently allocated to us. We're also looking to increase our foreign language programming, including the closed captioning of not only events, as you know, we do some things here, but some of the other content, specifically working with Dr. Lipsky and hoping to close caption in Spanish some of the board meetings. So we're looking to increase. We did hear what you said, and we are seeking and striving to be responsible and responsive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For sure. I think that, I have to say that this is such uncharted territory in some ways, in terms of how to best package and how to best push out information that the public will somehow find. I do appreciate all the work and the collaboration and the effort that has been put into figuring that out. I think that you know very well that, especially locally, we don't have a lot of news outlets. And there is just so much that happens on a daily basis. So many, wonderful things that are occurring or things that we need to communicate to the public. And everybody is trying to do the best, that they can through social media platforms or whatever kinds of, platforms out there. And so you play a very important role. But part of that role then for some reason means that it's kind of like figuring out, what is next, and how to, what is the most creative way to reach such a complex county. So in some ways I don't envy you because, I'm constantly trying to figure out like, what is that, what does it take and how should we best do it? But I have seen a lot of the progress and I've seen a lot of the really creative ways to do this and really appreciate, you continuing to be actively involved and understanding that. And so, just really wanted to say that because I know it's a really tough time to figure out how to push out information to our public. Council President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First off, thank you all very much for what you do, and we appreciate that as well. And I know this is not a budget hearing, but since we're all sitting here having a chat, the FCC, I know this is not a shock to you all, the FCC is not our friend on this, especially for revenues. And we don't know how much it's going to get chipped at each time they seem to send information, and it's getting worse and worse. So I don't know if there's a possibility, and I know that on public television they have foundations that will be, they're not ads, they're donors, and they don't get into the content. They specifically say, that this was donated and this program was paid for in part of, et cetera. I wonder if there's any possibility that we start trying to do something like that just beyond for what we need now, but candidly so that we can have a future, because it's getting almost to that point.
I will say that absolutely looking for different and new and diverse revenue streams is on the minds of all of us. And yes, we do know the FCC nor the cable companies are our friends on this in particular. MCM in particular has made some progress in this direction as we apply for many grants, and we also create sponsorship opportunities. I think you've both been part of our Small Business Network program that has sponsors. We have other programming that is also directly sponsored. Making the connection between the sponsorships and the content can be difficult, or I shouldn't say difficult, but it takes some creativity. Yep. It also takes a certain kind of staffing, a certain kind of conversation, and we are, as a group now, exploring how to do that for the collective. And MCM is hoping that we can at least share what we've learned so far as we too continue to explore what it's going to take to find that funding going forward. And likewise, I hope that we will all also continue to pressure the people who do business, who are in the cable business now, but we know they're in the internet business and the streaming business, to support our communities and this kind of work, which is also just as necessary, even though the cable channels may not be as much as they were.
And I think, go ahead, please.
As you may know, we are also members of 2 national organizations, and we are beginning conversations with our colleagues about some of the models and things that are working for them.
And I appreciate that. I think it's something that we have to keep on our mind, because I'm as much as I don't believe the FCC is correct in what they've said it, and they're, they have authority over us, and in this instance. So anyhow, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else is going to present, or?
Just very briefly, I've also pointed out in my packet 2 other things. One is that the negotiations with our 2 major providers are around the corner, and I expressed some concern about the position of cable administrator being zeroed out, and perhaps it's a good time for Gail to say a few things about her strategy to make sure that we're as strong as possible going into the negotiations.
Yeah, it's so important.
I can say that we've had quite a bit of dialogue about the negotiations and trying to position our arguments. We're doing.
Can you get closer to that microphone?
We are doing some national research to kind of see what a good negotiation looks like. We do feel that our current position is strong, and that there are opportunities, of course, to improve it. But if we run into stumbling blocks, we at least want to maintain what we have. So we are beginning to determine leveraging potential negotiations and strategizing on who will lead that going forward without having that position within the organization.
Okay, so when will we know roughly? Because I know in the past, that position plays such a pivotal role in these negotiations for us, because they're not simple negotiations. So will there be a time when the council will know who's going to lead those negotiations in the absence of that position?
Yes, it's a high priority for us, and I would say in the next several weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
The other very quick item is to look at the revenue charts, which are on the last 2 pages of your packet. Again, the council last year, for the first time, required the executive to submit quarterly revenue, not estimates, but actuals. So with a lag time of about 3 or 4 months, the council is receiving these estimates. On Circle 18, you'll see the cable revenues from fiscal 19, and on Circle 19, you'll see the cable revenues for fiscal 20 year to date. I have 2 comments. One is I was somewhat concerned that the actual revenues in fiscal 19 were somewhat lower than our projection, and yet it appears to me that we probably had spent the money already. So the question is, how did we make up this difference? This is a question that perhaps can be taken up during the budget review session as well, but I just wanted to flag it here for you. And the second one is the forecasting methodology. It was going all over the place. I think in the last 2 years, the finance folks that have been looking at the forecast have done a really good job, and as a consequence, the error between the forecast and the actual has begun to shrink. So this is something to consider, that we're getting a little bit better at our forecasts, which were not very good 2-3 years ago, where we're missing $2, $3, $4 million in our forecast and actuals. So that's something to applaud the executive branch.
Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Tregas, hi, Joe Webster with DTS, Chief Broadband Officer. We have been working very closely with finance and have developed what is a very accurate forecasting model using sophisticated Monte Carlo simulations. So for the last 7 or so quarters, since 6 or 7 quarters since I've been involved, there's been plus or minus, a half of 1% or 1% accuracy. So we feel comfortable. The decline is fairly steady, around 2% per year. We don't see any significant changes in that coming in terms of cable franchise fee revenues. There are other factors, FCC actions and in-kind contributions and other factors that can dramatically impact that decline. But as far as the forecast model, I'm very confident that it's quite accurate going forward.
Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate everybody being here today. We will have another conversation during budget. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing so far. And all the partners are in the audience as well. Thank you. All right. Okay, so next item, number 4, it's a work session for a supplemental appropriation to the FY20 operating budget. Montgomery County Government Community Engagement Cluster, Office of Community Partnerships. This is $581,700 for Census 2020 grants program, and the source of funds is state grant. And Ms. Chen has prepared the packet, recommends approval, subject to issues raised at the public hearing. And yeah, I believe I have that. Yeah, and so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chen.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Chen, Legislative Analyst for Montgomery County Council. I'll start off while we wait for everyone next. There we go.
On cue.
Actually, on cue. So just to reiterate just the timing of this situation, to make sure that's on the record, because of the timing of the census, which is right now, we are actually holding the GO committee work session before the public hearing that's scheduled on Tuesday, March 10th. So anything we talk about here will be pending any input or feedback from the public hearing on Tuesday. Just to make sure about that.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about the supplemental appropriation from the county executive on state funds to be released to the Office of Community Partnerships in order to create a grant fund under Community Foundation for census activities. There's a couple of questions I wanted to ask. The census
Mr. Ellis, maybe if you can.
Yeah.
Easier.
That's okay.
It's good, all right. Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. So the initial review of the budget and the census activities that are lined out, line item by the state funds.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, Ms. Booth. It's quite all right.
Some people know how to make an entry.
So we wanted to just, reiterate that these are state funds, so there's no necessary need to delay the appropriation of it. And second, just to speak with the actual census team that just gave us a briefing last week on whether there are any gaps in their strategy moving forward. So if I could just throw out a first question to the team on whether or not how much of the state funds that we're appropriating, $581,000 and some change, are going directly to the Office of Community Partnerships or to nonprofit partners?
So we've allocated 300. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Diane Vu, Office of Community Partnerships. Thank you for having us here today. And thank you for asking us to do the full briefing last Tuesday. And we're happy to be back to talk to you about our census work. So from our state grant of $581,700, we've allocated $300,000 to go to nonprofit organizations, to 20 nonprofit organizations. The Community Foundation is managing this process. Organizations were invited to apply and respond to an RFP based on their ability to target hard-to-count census tracts and also undercounted communities.
And when was that RFP, when was that released?
It was released 2 weeks ago, and so the committee is making decisions right now. However, nonprofit organizations have been working with us since July 1 on census outreach.
Okay. So you're saying that of the 581,700 supplemental appropriation, 300,000 through the Community Foundation is going to be distributed to roughly 20 organizations?
Yes, that's what we allocated.
Okay. And what is the scope roughly of these organizations? Like, roughly do you have a sense of the average allocation for each? I'm just trying to gauge capacity issues for us.
Yes, so nonprofits were suggested to apply in a range of $15,000 to $25,000.
Okay.
So depending on how many nonprofit organizations responded and how much they applied for, dollars would be allocated within that range.
Okay, so then the remaining 281,000, roughly 900, how is that going to be used?
So we allocated $57,200 of the state grant for a full-time census coordinator. That is Sean Ellis. He's been working with our office since July 1, launching the Everyone Counts Montgomery County campaign. We allocated $114,500 for marketing, and that includes printing of posters and flyers in 7 different languages. It includes ride-on ads. It includes outreach to Spanish media outlets as well. We had also allocated $20,000 for a social media intern. However, at this point, we believe that using those dollars towards social media ad buys, this is a strategy similar to the Census Bureau, would be a better way for us to spend those monies. That way we can target specific census tracts and also specific communities. And also because our Public Information Office, in partnership with MCPS, the Council PIO, is working with working with media stakeholders across county government on our social media. So we have a lot of capacity there. We allocated $50,000 for outreach events. So we said that either we would host 5 events around the county or sponsor events in partnership with other partners. So we've already spent monies on the Future Fest festival and also for our MLK events. We allocated $40,000 for community organizers to supplement the work of our community liaisons, particularly for the LGBTQ and Middle Eastern communities.
So how is that done? So you have the different liaisons in your office?
Yes.
And then
So our challenge. Our liaisons, as you know, we have 7 ethnic liaisons and 1 interfaith liaison. Only 3 of them are full time. The other, we have 1 part time at 20 hours a week, and then the remaining 2 work part time as well. And so when we applied for the state grant, we knew that we would have holes to the LGBTQ community and the Middle Eastern community. And so therefore we added dollars for targeted outreach to those communities because we knew our liaisons wouldn't be able to cover those.
Got it. Okay, and so if I understand correctly, the 581,700 grant from the state, then it requires a match, right?
Yes.
What is that range? Because I see the figure of $50,000. Where is that in the range of the match?
Yeah, so all jurisdictions and nonprofit organizations that applied to the state were required to show a 1-to-1 match, either in cash or in kind. Jurisdictions and nonprofits could make determinations on how they wanted to allocate it proportion-wise. What we did was we said that we would put 50,000 into as cash, and then 531,700 as in-kind. So for our in-kind match, we are using hours of the liaisons, office space, leveraging the ability of leveraging marketing and media through Radio America in our public information office. So that's the 531,700 in kind, and then 50,000 in cash.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out and get a sense of is just the scope and the capacity, because, you know, when I look at the just other jurisdictions, I don't know, District of Columbia had $1,100,000, I believe.
Yeah, like
I know Maryland had $5 million total, and of course we're the largest jurisdiction. But then it really, to me, it calls to question this notion of our match, right? We're the largest jurisdiction in Maryland. We have the highest proportion of immigrants in Maryland. We have definitely, I think, a lot of different communities where we need to go really deep. And to me, this is just an investment, right? We're investing a particular amount of money because we know we're going to get a return and we're going to lose money.
Yep.
So I'm just not sure that I believe that this $50,000 match on our part is enough to give you the capacity to really go deep the way you need to go. And I appreciate the effort, because I know how much, you know, you guys are doing to try to leverage, but that should not substitute, right, having actual resources. I mean, you have this amazing group of liaisons, for example, and wouldn't it be amazing to say, hey, this is like the budget, you guys know these communities, you've been working there forever, boom, best practices in those communities, right? And so I'm trying to understand then, I mean, what would be the process for us to increase that match? Because, I mean, I've been in all these press conferences and in all these events, and we're constantly saying, you know, we can't miss this opportunity, we're missing so much money. But then I feel like we got to put some more money in there, right? So how do we proceed? I just $50,000 to me sounds like a very, very weak investment in our part to match in order for us to get to where we need to go, and time is ticking, right?
Yes. So what I will say is we've spoken to the county executive, and the county executive is aware of gaps that we see, particularly in outreach to languages outside of Spanish. That is a very big hole. You know, in hindsight, when we applied for the state grant, the entire state allocated $5 million, and the suggested cap on grants was $250K. For jurisdictions and nonprofit organizations. We doubled that and then some. And so we prioritized based on what we thought was most needed, and hoping that we would be able to fundraise additional funds on the back end. You know, now that we have been on the ground and doing this work, we do realize that there are holes. And the biggest hole that we see is media and marketing, particularly to the 5 languages, top 5 spoken languages outside of Spanish in the county. And additionally, in light of what's been happening with the public health scare, and planning for the potential for community members to not want to interface publicly, we are going to have to put more significant investment into marketing and media. This is in line with what other jurisdictions and the Census Bureau is thinking as well. So I've had these conversations with the county executive, and we're committed to working with you to meet that gap.
Is there a particular amount that you think would be reasonable for us to be able to penetrate the way that we should penetrate, so we don't leave money, you know, on the table here?
Yeah, so we're still working that. I mean, obviously, with the development of what's been happening with the public scare, things have been moving very rapidly. We're working through budgets, and we're happy to talk to you more about.
We don't have a lot of time, right? So Census Day is April 1st.
Right.
So, you know, we're actually holding this session because we understand that we need to go ahead and appropriate this money. But I literally feel like by Tuesday next week, we need to know what that amount is and whether the executive is going to send that amount or whether or whether we need to move and do something. I think it's really critical. And again, I've been in a lot, I'm a member of COG, so I've been in a lot of these presentations, and I've been asking, this is why I requested the briefing.
Yep.
I've been asking, okay, cool, what are we doing in Montgomery County? Because got to be all in, right? So is there a way that by Tuesday we have a sense from you that the executive is going to send over a particular supplemental or?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. We've been having these conversations. We're going back and forth with some of our providers to see what budget line items actually cost. And so we're getting all of those quotes, and my hope is to have all of that tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. So we'll follow up with Carolyn in order to have a sense, because like I said, we just want to be as supportive as possible, give you guys those resources so we can make sure the folks understand that this is, really critical. And you're absolutely correct with everything that's out there right now and the fears that exist. We don't want that to be another layer that would affect us. So
thank you very much.
Of course. Anything else, Ms. Chen? No. Anything else? Well, with that, I think the committee, 2-0, will go ahead and ask for this to go forward. So thank you so much, and thank you very much for everything that you're doing. I know you guys are working super, super hard, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Okay, cool. Item number 5. This is a work session for our FY 21 to 26 Recommended Capital Improvement Program. This is the Department of General Services, General Government Projects. I see Mr. Dice, Mr. Assad. Let's see. Who else? Huh?
We work very hard.
I know that you do. You do all the time, Mr. Mia. All right. So we have Ms. Rodriguez has prepared the packet for us, and I think what I like to do, obviously, is to go through particular decision points. And so what we'll do is we'll, address a particular decision point, and then if there are questions, we'll pause. And if we're fine with everything, we'll just say without objection, and we'll move through it. Appreciate everybody being here. All right, Ms. Rodriguez.
So for the record, I'm Nicole Rodriguez-Hernandez, a legislative analyst for the Montgomery County Council. And as Chair Navarro said, we will be going through the DGS executive's recommendation for the FY 21 to 26 CIP. I've divided the packet into level of effort projects, reports that can be found in the 2020 Infrastructure Maintenance Task Force report, and county facilities. Overall, the executive's total recommended FY 21 to 26 CIP for the Department of General Services is $208 million, which is approximately $64.3 million less than the approved CIP, or 23.6% less.
Okay, Mr. Dice, and I read here that this is because of the completion of several major projects within the budget. So anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Well, we have, thank you, David Dice, Director, Department of General Services. And I don't know if I've introduced our new Chief Operating Officer and my other deputy, Jamie Cook, who joins us for the first time.
All right.
In
well,
one
welcome.
of these.
You'll have some stories to tell.
Yes.
We prepped him for you, that's all.
Yes.
But yes, General Services has been aggressively pursuing implementation. As you know, with even major standalone capital projects, there's a design phase and then the construction phase. And with the level of effort projects such as these, we're in a perpetual design and implementation stage. But with the hiring of Mr. Greg Boykin, who is our new facilities chief, and filling some other vacant positions, our implementation rate has gone up quite a bit. Within ADA, we're maxing out pretty much every one of these all across the board. So that's one of the reasons some of these major projects have been done. And also, under these level of effort projects, some of them have been fairly significant. For instance, the elevator refurbishment at Public Safety Headquarters in and of itself was over $1 million. So we're seeing an awful lot of those larger level of efforts being completed, but there's more to come.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Rodriguez-Hernandez.
So starting with the Americans with Disabilities Act Compliance, the executive recommends level funding of $4.5 million, which is no change from the approved CIP.
Okay,
Status.
Without objection?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
With asbestos abatement, the same, the executive recommends level funding of $120,000 per fiscal year, which is no change from the approved CIP.
Okay, without objection, we're fine with that.
In energy conservation, the executive did recommend an additional $6.69 million increase for the FY21 to 26 CIP. This is a result of the addition of $2.23 million in the other category for fiscal years 21 through 23, stemming from the utility incentives funding source. This is a result of the Pepco-Exelon merger, which we were given specific funds to be used for energy conservation-related projects. DGS has now identified an initial list of projects, and that is why the executive has recommended funding now.
Great,
So
all right.
concurs.
Without objection, we approve that.
For energy systems modernization, the executive recommends level funding of $10.3 million per fiscal year, which is no change from the approved, except for fiscal year 19. And in fiscal year 19, there was an increase in expenditures due to slippage caused by delays in obtaining the investment grade audit with energy service companies for several facilities.
All right, without objection, we approve that.
For environmental compliance, the executive recommends level funding of $1.4 million per fiscal year, which is no change from the approved.
Okay. No objection.
So now moving on to the Infrastructure Maintenance Task Force report projects. This report started in March 2005, and it was a way for different departments such as DGS, MCDOT, Council to come together and identify the optimal annual funding to replace or rehabilitate the county's infrastructure so the entire inventory will last over the acceptable lifetime. In 2020, we have received the newest report. It's a preliminary report. It will be finalized after the operating budget is released from the executive. And in this report, we have identified general government projects and their ARC level, which stands for Acceptable Annual Replacement Cost. And this is the identified amount of, for how much or many should be replaced annually times the average cost. So we compare the executive's recommendation to this ARC level for each project. And you'll see a summary of these projects on the bottom of page 6.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with building envelope repair, this was not identified in the 2020 report, but it was in the 2016 report. And I just wanted to note that the executive recommends level funding of $1.55 million per fiscal year, which is no change. And if you compare it to the 2016 report, he is meeting 98% of the optimal annual funding recommended.
All right, without objection.
With elevator modernization, the executive recommends level funding of $1 million per fiscal year, which is no change from the approved, and this meets 51% of the annual funding needs identified as optimal funding from the report.
All right. Yes.
For HVAC and electricity replacement, the county executive recommends level funding of $2.95 million, which is no change, and this meets from the approved CIP, and this meets 50% of the annual funding identified in the report.
All right.
For life safety systems, which are systems that prevent or facilities and occupants from fire emergencies, help assist them, the executive did recommend level funding of $625,000 per fiscal year, which I'll note was no change for the approved for fiscal years 21 through 24. As I'm sure you are well aware, in fiscal year 19-20, the committee recommended and council approved one-time addition of a total of $3 million or $1.5 million per fiscal year for the urgent replacement of the fire alarm systems in the Judicial Center, Judicial Center Annex, and the Executive Office Building. Happy to report that the main system for those buildings have been replaced and new components will be added in this fiscal year and next.
Okay, great. All right.
So for planned lifecycle asset replacement, the county executive recommends level funding of $2.25 million, which is no change, again, except for fiscal year 20, and that's because the committee recommended and council approved a $220,000 transfer to the Black Rock Center for the Arts for a capital grants request. So that's the difference there. I will note that council staff recommends adding $600,000 per fiscal year for the CIP, and that is specifically due to the rates that the current recommended funding meets the report's optimal annual funding. So right now it's at 16%. You'll notice from the projects that we just discussed and the projects that we will, that this is substantially lower than the other projects. So most of them are around 50% or higher. Due to the flexibility of scope in this project, and it covers a lot of necessary projects that need to be completed for the reliability and quality of our county facilities, I believe that if we increase the funding of $600,000 per year, that'll let us hit 20% for the annual funding. And I know that's not a huge change, but in order to meet, it'd be $14.2 million is the optimal annual funding, and that would be a very big jump if we met 100%. So the incremental change now, if we increased it, maybe potentially in future years, could help bring this project up to par to the other projects that are in the report.
All right, well, we'll accept that. I wish we could do more, but I think that's a reasonable direction to go, so we'll accept that.
Great. Moving on to resurfacing parking lots, the executive recommends level funding of $650,000, which is no change from the approved, and this meets 66% of the optimal annual funding.
All right.
And finally, with roof replacement, the executive recommends level funding of $2.24 million per fiscal year, which is no change from the approved, and that meets 46% of the optimal annual funding.
Okay, without objection.
Perfect. And now moving on to county facility projects, I just wanted to note with the council office building renovation, which is of course very important to all of us here, that so that we can have the most up-to-date information and figures and options, that we would like to postpone that discussion to the next meeting that we discuss general government projects.
Okay, so we're going to find a date for that?
Yes, so currently it's potentially scheduled for April 22nd.
22nd, okay.
But just confirming the schedule with our clerk, just finalizing.
All right, just want to make sure that everybody's ready when that moment comes.
Yes, DGS has been informed, and they are looking into all the options.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. We can't wait.
I will just add that by then the auditorium downstairs will be completed, and maybe we can have this meeting there.
You know what? That would be really amazing. Just wonderful. Make that dream come true. All right.
For the council office building garage, it is pending closeout, and that is why the executive has not recommended additional funding for the FY21 to 26 period. I did want to note that in FY19, the committee did recommend and council approved an addition of $1.99 million to address unforeseen costs in fixing the structural elements of the garage, as well as necessary repairs to the garage stairwells that were not previously considered in the scope of work. And I believe that executive staff has noted that it should be substantially completed by summer 2020.
Yeah? Okay.
You can now park anywhere and not worry about pieces falling on your car or yourself. It actually looks quite good. Most folks, when they go to garages, don't look up. We don't always encourage them to. Here I'm encouraging you to. The contractor did an excellent job, and hats off to DGS staff, because it was a logistical nightmare.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
but they did a good job.
All's well that ends well.
Yes, absolutely.
For the executive office building HVAC renovation, I will note that the executive has recommended a different expenditure schedule from the approved, and that is primarily due to the fact that in fiscal year 20, they had slated to spend $1 million on a concept study to analyze the building, but they've only actually spent $400,000. So $600,000 in GO bonds has slipped and moving to fiscal year 23, where they have now placed new dollars.
Okay.
For the Red Brick Courthouse structural repairs, I've included, there was a corrected PDF that was not included in the original book, so you can find that on circle page 24 and 25. And that's why you'll note in the chart there is the crossed out from the original and then now the corrected PDF. And according to executive staff, this project has a significantly revised scope, which has reduced the county's financial responsibilities. We're focusing now on structural stabilization, and the project has been delayed to fiscal year 24 as the funds that were slated to be spent in fiscal year 20 for design, $526,000, was not actually spent. So that has also been pushed out to fiscal year 24 and beyond.
All right.
For the Rockville Gray Courthouse, there is also a corrected PDF attached to Circle page 26 that is not included in the original book. And that is because it did not originally incorporate the committee's recommendation and council's approval of a supplemental appropriation to accelerate the funds for the completion of this project. And so the new PDF correctly reflects that, and they're expecting completion by fall 2020.
Oh, wow. Great. Okay.
For the Old Blair Auditorium reuse, originally this PDF shows a reduction of $12.393 million. The corrected PDF is attached as well, as the book did not reflect the correct reduction amount. Originally, this was a project between MCPS and DGS on renovating, in part, the Elizabeth Stickley Auditorium. MCPS has now taken over this project solely as classroom space demands have required them to use that space for different purposes.
Okay. All right.
And there's a few pending closeout projects as well. In addition, is the MCPS food distribution facility relocation, the Montgomery County radio shop relocation, and the Montgomery County Public School bus depot. I would like to note that while it does note pending closeout, it is still an active and ongoing project, and that there is $1.3 million in unencumbered funds.
Council President Katz.
Thank you very much. On this one, obviously this is a very important project, and I know it's important to you all as well. It's not an easy one to solve, but it is one that we will solve. It says pending closeout, and of course this is an active, ongoing project. We want to underline that. It is underlined in the book, but we want to, in our packet, but we want to underline that. But this is one that we need to continue to be, and it says it's a high priority. I know at the executives, I've spoken to him on many occasions, not just on this topic, but on others as well, and he's trying to make this a high priority as well. We've just got to figure out a place. It's not an easy thing, and once we find it, we have to have the time to move what we're doing, so please.
Absolutely. It is a high priority for us, and the county executive has made it very clear that it's a high priority for him, one of his top priorities. And we have been working on some scenarios. Unfortunately, one of those, working with the city of Rockville, did not materialize, but we're still working on other plans that I hope will bear fruit. We've got a consultant that we've just come on board to do some test fits on some sites and feasibility analysis, so hopefully we'll have better direction in a couple months. But yes, it is an ongoing high priority for us, and we know for the community. We've heard from many of your constituents,
Absolutely.
President Katz, and so we're expending every effort we can on this. And once we have that, then we'll work with OMB to plug this into the future CIP. It will not be inexpensive, but we need to do this and do it as quickly as we can.
I was hopeful that it was going to be a little faster because of the work that you were doing with City of Rockville, but obviously it just didn't work out.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So it turns out that I also have constituents in that area because we share pieces of that particular constituency.
Indeed you do. I've heard from them too.
Yes, and so I, honestly believe that, and I've also expressed this to the executive, that we need to put a timeline. I, have been sensitive to the fact that there were particular negotiations that he was pursuing, and I was really pleased to hear that. But unfortunately, since some of that didn't pan out, I think that whatever Plan B is being considered, that we do need to have some conversations about timeline, because this definitely has lingered way too long, and we're missing out an amazing opportunity as we're working towards all these economic development goals and housing targets and things like that. So it is my hope that we could have a briefing pretty soon and you've said a couple of months, but, again, here we are already in March. That will take us to, whatever, May. And by then, if there are going to be some significant issues regarding budget considerations, we kind of need to be able to choreograph all of that.
Sure.
So maybe Ms. Rodriguez Hernandez can, work with you to figure out how we could best proceed. And I am sensitive that some of these negotiations, obviously, we're not party to that, and they have to be done in order to preserve, the confidentiality of the terms. But I believe now it's really important for us to have a particular deadline for.
We'll be happy to
this.
follow up with you on that, absolutely.
Thank you.
We understand.
Okay, all right, next one.
And for the last three projects, we'll start with the Advanced Land Acquisition Revolving Fund, or ALARF. This PDF does not show an expenditure schedule as is policy for this type of capital fund, but there's currently $12.532 million unencumbered in this PDF.
Okay.
For facilities site selection, the executive recommends level funding of $25,000 per fiscal year for the FY 21 to 26 CIP, which is no change from the approved except for fiscal year 19. I believe executive staff was ready to describe why fiscal year 19 had a increase of $44,000.
Okay. You're going to explain why? Is that, what was it?
I'm sorry, I was talking to Greg. Go ahead.
Just noting why fiscal year 19 had a $44,000 expenditure amount compared to facility site selection.
Page 19?
Go ahead.
Yes, OMB staff did some research. What happened in FY18, we had a large available balance of $93,000, and we took out $49,000 as part of that year's savings plan. That left us with $44K, which we kept in the project for FY19 in case any new opportunities came up. So that reflects that action.
Okay.
Otherwise, council staff recommends for approval.
Great. So I know that you also, let's see, okay, so we have information on Circle 4, some facility planning. And I see there the Wheaton Arts and Humanities Center. And I appreciate all the work that you have done to get us to the point of a POR. And I know that, of course, we want to make sure that we do have a PDF so that that project can begin to at least
Correct.
have a life in our CIP.
As promised, when you met with the executive and I sat in, the PDF has been drafted. It has been given to OMB under review, so you will see that PDF.
Thank you. Appreciate that very, very much. All right. Anything else, Ms. Hernandez?
Just for facility planning, executive recommends level funding of $260,000 per fiscal year, which is no change except for fiscal year 19, where the council approved a cost savings of $18,000. Otherwise, that is it.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And this is your debut on the GO Fiscal Policy Committee, and you did an extraordinary job. So we appreciate your work.
If I could,
Yes.
Nicole has been great. Her commitment to learning and ramping up very quickly has been amazing. So congratulations. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
I say that so you'll treat us nice the next time.
Don't believe the hype. No, I'm just kidding. You did it.
You don't have to treat him that nicely. That's okay.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Nicole. Really appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much. So I think that's that item, correct?
Yes, and that concludes the.
That's it, right? We just had 5 items? Oh, my goodness. I thought we had more. Let's just do more. Just kidding. Let's just stay here forever. Well, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.